Imagine looking at the man you love, only to discover he legally erased you 90 days ago. It was a quiet Thursday morning in Austin. I walked into the lawyer's office to inherit $35 million and walked out a ghost in my own marriage. He thought I was the perfect pawn to carry his ruin. He forgot one crucial rule. The architect who built the castle knows exactly which brick will bring the entire foundation crashing down. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of the Violet Revenge Stories channel. We want to sincerely thank you for your continuous support, but unfortunately, YouTube has recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the operating budget we need. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to cover their living expenses and continue creating these thrilling stories for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the comments of this video. My name is Aurora Brooks. I am 32 years old, the founder and chief architect of Etheria Greenscapes, a firm dedicated to urban ecological landscape design. The air conditioning in Marcus's downtown Austin law office was set just a fraction too low, sending a faint chill over the polished mahogany conference table. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Texas sun was blinding, but inside, the atmosphere was heavily muted, wrapped in the expensive leather and hushed tones of high-stakes corporate law. I sat in a high-backed chair, my hands neatly folded in my lap, processing the words my late uncle's attorney had just spoken. $35 million, Aurora, Marcus said, his voice steady, grounded in decades of dealing with massive estates. The portfolio includes prime commercial real estate and a highly diversified trust fund. It is entirely yours. $35 million. The magnitude of the sum washed over me, heavy and surreal. My first instinct, the reflex of a woman deeply in love and completely intertwined with her partner, was to reach for my phone. I needed to call Julian. Julian was not just my husband. He was the chief financial officer of my company. We had built our lives together, brick by brick, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. I wanted to hear his voice, to tell him that all our sleepless nights and financial worries were instantly over. I unlocked my screen, my thumb hovering over his name. "Hold on a moment, Aurora," Marcus interrupted. His tone had abruptly shifted from professional warmth to sharp confusion. He was squinting at his dual-monitor setup, his fingers typing rapidly across the keyboard. The rhythmic clacking sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Is there a problem with the transfer?" I asked, my thumb still resting on Julian's contact photo. Marcus stopped typing. He looked over the top of his reading glasses, his expression completely unreadable. "Aurora, the public registry system shows that your marital status has changed. It says you have been legally and unilaterally divorced for exactly 3 months." The chill from the air vents suddenly felt like absolute zero. My lungs refused to expand. I stared at Marcus, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to apologize for a glitch in the state database. But Marcus did not smile. He turned the monitor slightly so I could see the official county seal, the finalized decree, and my own looping signature at the bottom of the digital scan. 3 months ago, my mind violently rewound the timeline, desperately searching through the chaotic blur of the past 90 days. 3 months ago, I was physically and mentally drowning. I was staying awake for 3 consecutive nights to finalize the master blueprints for the Green Lung Project, a massive city contract that would define the legacy of Etheria Greenscapes. I remembered the burning in my eyes, the endless cups of black coffee, the sheer exhaustion. And I remembered Julian. He had walked into my drafting room at 2 a.m, smelling of expensive cologne, holding a thick, intimidating stack of financial authorization contracts. He was my CFO. He handled the money. I handled the vision. He had rubbed my shoulders, kissed the top of my head, and gently urged me to sign the documents so he could secure our bridge loan before the morning banking deadline. "Just sign right here on the sticky notes, darling," he had whispered. "I will take care of the rest." He had slipped the divorce papers into the middle of that thick, heavy stack. And I, blinded by exhaustion and absolute trust, had signed away my marriage without ever reading the header. The shock did not manifest as tears. It crystallized into a terrifying, deadening silence. A profound numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. The man I shared my bed with, the man who held my company's purse strings, had legally amputated me from his life 90 days ago, and I had been serving him breakfast every morning since. "Marcus," I said. My voice did not shake. It sounded hollow, like it belonged to a stranger. "You are to keep this inheritance strictly confidential. I want you to freeze all access to this trust immediately. Set up the highest level of security protocols. I am the only human being allowed to touch or even view these assets. Do not breathe a word of this to anyone, especially not Julian." Marcus nodded slowly, recognizing the dangerous shift in the room's gravity. "Consider it locked down, Aurora." That evening, I drove back to the smart mansion we had designed together. The automated lights faded up perfectly as my car entered the driveway. The front door unlocked seamlessly. Inside, the house smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary. Julian walked out of the kitchen, looking like the picture-perfect model of a devoted husband. He wore a crisp linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up casually. He handed me a glass of expensive red wine, leaned in, and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my cheek. "Rough day at the office, my love?" he asked, flashing that warm, familiar smile that used to make my heart flutter. I took the glass of wine. The crystal felt heavy and cold in my hand. I looked deeply into his eyes, watching him perform his flawless, loving script. I took a slow sip, tasting the bitter tannins, and smiled back. Right then, standing in the beautiful foyer of our custom-built home, I realized the terrifying truth. I was not looking at my husband. I was looking at a monster wearing a human mask, and we were about to play a very different kind of game. I woke up at 6 o'clock the next morning, carefully slipping out from under the heavy duvet. Julian shifted, murmuring my name softly in his sleep. A wave of pure disgust hit the back of my throat, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. By 8 o'clock, I was miles away from our pristine neighborhood, sitting in a dimly lit diner with cracked vinyl booths. Across the sticky table sat Silas. He was a former agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation who had traded his government badge for the lucrative, cutthroat world of private corporate intelligence. He was a ghost in the financial sector, specializing in tracing white-collar crime. I slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "I need you to track my husband, Julian. I want him under surveillance 24/7. But physical trailing is secondary. I need a complete, surgical cross-audit of his entire personal cash flow. Track every dime, every offshore wire, every hidden ledger, and every encrypted digital wallet." Silas took the envelope, feeling the weight of the $100 bills inside. He gave a single curt nod. I spent the next 72 hours playing the role of the oblivious, overworked architect. I smiled at Julian over dinner, poured his coffee, and even let him casually review my departmental expense reports. I was a flawless actress, but by the end of the third day, Silas summoned me to a secure, unmarked office building on the industrial side of the city. The room was dark, illuminated only by a massive digital projection mapping out a complex web of financial transactions. Silas stood by the screen, his face grim. "Your husband is not hiding a second family or an illegitimate child, Aurora," Silas began, his voice gravelly and precise. "He is hiding a catastrophic financial black hole." He highlighted a cluster of offshore accounts flagged in deep red. "Julian owes a staggering $15 million. He got caught up in illegal, high-stakes offshore gambling syndicates. To try and win it back, He took heavily leveraged margin loans to invest in junk cryptocurrencies. When the market crashed, he was completely wiped out. Silas clicked a remote, and the diagram shifted to display the corporate structure of Ethereum Greenscapes. To keep the loan sharks from breaking his legs, Julian has been quietly stripping your company for parts. He used his position as chief financial officer to secretly take out massive second mortgages on your joint real estate properties. He has been embezzling operating capital from your active design projects, shuffling the money through dummy corporations. The brutal logic of his plan suddenly locked into place in my mind. "The divorce papers," I whispered. "Exactly," Silas confirmed. "That divorce decree you unknowingly signed was his legal firewall. By divorcing you 3 months ago, he severed his legal attachment to the incoming fallout. When the company inevitably collapses under the weight of these hidden, unauthorized debts, the creditors and the federal regulators will only see your name as the primary owner. You will bear the entire legal and financial burden as an individual. Meanwhile, he has already prepared the paperwork to launder the remaining stolen cash to an untouchable account in the Cayman Islands." I gripped the edge of the conference table. The financial betrayal was a surgical strike designed to annihilate me. But Silas was not finished. He clicked another button, and a high-resolution surveillance photograph appeared on the screen. It was Julian, sitting in a secluded corner booth of an exclusive, members-only steakhouse. His hand was intimately intertwined with a woman's hand across the white tablecloth. I recognized her instantly. The sharp, predatory cheekbones, the flawless designer suit. It was Elena. She was the chief executive officer of our fiercest rival firm, the exact company aggressively competing against me for the massive Green Lung City contract. "She is not just a romantic mistress," Silas stated, bringing up a dense log of encrypted data transfers. "She is his exit strategy. My cyber team intercepted Julian's network traffic on your home server. For the past 4 weeks, he has been using his top-level administrative access to bypass your internal security firewalls. He has been systematically downloading your proprietary, highly classified architectural blueprints for the Green Lung project. He is handing your entire life's work straight to Elena." I stared at the data logs, the sheer audacity of the treason burning through my veins. Julian was arming my enemy so her company could undercut my bid, steal my design, and win the city contract using my own genius. "What is the arrangement between them?" I asked, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet register. "Elena promised him 30% of the total project profits once she secures the bid using your stolen designs," Silas replied. "It is more than enough money to pay off his $15 million debt to the criminal syndicate and give them a massive nest egg. They plan to run away together the moment the city announces the winner. They will leave you completely bankrupt, professionally ruined, and facing potential federal fraud charges for the missing funds." I looked at the screen, analyzing the frozen, smiling faces of the man I had married and the woman who wanted to destroy my empire. They truly believed they had orchestrated the perfect corporate murder. They thought I was just a naive creative who only understood soil compositions and aesthetic structures, too blind to comprehend the brutal mathematics of their betrayal. But as I absorbed every piece of Silas's intelligence, the numbness in my chest finally shattered. It was replaced by a cold, absolute, and terrifying clarity. Julian wanted to play a high-stakes game of corporate espionage and financial ruin. I was going to show him exactly how a master architect designs a flawless demolition. Knowing you are standing on the very edge of total bankruptcy, carefully engineered by the man smiling across the dinner table, changes the fundamental chemistry of your brain. I did not flip the table. I did not scream or demand answers. Panic is a luxury I could not afford. Instead, I leaned into the exact character Julian needed me to be. I became the clueless, obsessive, creatively exhausted wife. That evening, I walked into our living room and intentionally let my briefcase drop with a heavy thud. I slumped onto the expensive leather sofa, rubbing my temples as if fighting off a massive migraine. Julian immediately poured me a glass of sparkling water and sat beside me. "I am so sorry I have been so absent lately, Julian," I murmured, looking up at him with wide, apologetic eyes. "The city council demands are endless. I feel like I'm completely neglecting you and our home. You have been so patient with me." The smug satisfaction that flashed across his face was almost microscopic, but I caught it. It was the look of a predator who believes the trap has finally snapped shut. He pulled me into a comforting embrace, his hand softly stroking my hair. "Do not worry about me, darling," he whispered, his voice dripping with synthetic warmth. "You just focus on your beautiful designs. I am taking care of everything else. We are a team." His arrogance made him sloppy. Over the next 48 hours, emboldened by my flawless performance of submission, Julian initiated the final phase of his extraction. Sitting in my office, I watched my private, secure monitor as he systematically drained the last remaining drops of working capital from Etheria Greenscapes. He routed the funds through a labyrinth of shell accounts disguised as vendor payments. He believed he was completely invisible. But while he was busy stealing pennies from a sinking ship, I was quietly buying the ocean. I met with Marcus in a secure boardroom at his firm. We moved swiftly and surgically. Utilizing a small fraction of my $35 million inheritance, which was legally ironclad and completely insulated from my supposed marriage, we established a faceless offshore asset management firm. Operating through layers of impenetrable corporate privacy laws, Marcus reached out to the shadowy syndicates holding Julian's gambling markers. Underworld creditors are practical businessmen. They prefer clean, immediate liquid cash over the tedious process of breaking a man's legs or chasing down embezzled funds. My anonymous firm purchased Julian's entire $15 million debt portfolio for a negotiated cash settlement. Marcus slid the finalized transfer deed across the table to me. I traced my finger over the heavy embossed seal. The irony was intoxicating. Julian was desperately stealing my money to pay off his ruthless creditors, completely unaware that his ultimate creditor was now me. I owned his debt. I owned his panic. I held his financial life in the palm of my hand. But holding the debt was not enough. I needed to ensure the legal fallout of his embezzlement crushed him alone. I needed to trap him in a cage of his own design. The following Tuesday, I walked into the finance department holding a massive stack of freshly printed documents. I manufactured a look of absolute frantic distress. I burst into Julian's private office, dropping the heavy binders onto his desk. "Julian, I am so sorry to interrupt," I said, catching my breath. "Our internal server had a minor crash this morning. The external auditors are demanding physical signatures for the quarterly compliance reviews and the state tax submissions by noon. The digital portal is completely locked. I am terrible with these financial statements, and my presentation for the city is in 10 minutes. Can you please just authorize these?" It was the exact same psychological tactic he had used on me 90 days prior. I played on his urgency and his inherent belief that I was financially illiterate. Julian sighed, offering an indulgent, patronizing smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Breathe. I will handle the paperwork. You go prepare for your big presentation." He clicked his pen and began signing the flagged pages one by one. He did not read the fine print. He did not notice the legally binding addendums I had intricately woven into the middle of the stack. By signing those specific pages, Julian was officially and personally verifying the legitimacy of the fraudulent wire transfers. He was formally acknowledging his sole fiduciary authorization over the shell accounts. He was effectively writing a detailed confession to massive corporate fraud and tax evasion, signing away his own freedom with every flick of his wrist. I thanked him, kissed his cheek, and walked out of the office with the physical evidence that would put him in a federal penitentiary. That night, the tragic comedy reached its brilliant peak. Julian told me he had to work late on budget forecasts, Instead, he drove to an exclusive, dimly lit French restaurant on the edge of the city. He slid into a secluded velvet booth, immediately grabbing Elena by the waist and pulling her in for a deep, victorious kiss. They ordered an expensive bottle of vintage champagne. They clinked their crystal glasses together, their faces flushed with greed and triumph. Through the ambient noise of the restaurant, Julian leaned in and whispered how perfectly the plan was unfolding. They laughed about my pathetic dedication to the company, absolutely certain that within a matter of days, I would be facing aggressive criminal prosecution for the massive financial black hole he had created. They were already spending their 30% cut of the city contract in their minds. They were so completely absorbed in their own brilliance that they never noticed the man sitting 2 tables away, obscured by a large decorative fern. Silas calmly sipped a glass of sparkling water, his custom-built, high-definition covert camera capturing every single frame, every arrogant smile, and every damning word of their celebration. The trap was fully set, and the prey had just locked the door from the inside. Exactly 7 days remained before the City Council of Austin was scheduled to announce the final winner of the highly coveted Green Lung project. The atmosphere inside the headquarters of Etheria Greenscapes was incredibly tense, thick with the kind of anxiety that precedes a major corporate victory or a devastating loss. Julian decided this was the exact moment to deliver his fatal blow. He understood the brutal reality of municipal contracts. A brilliant architectural design is completely worthless if the firm cannot physically build it. As my chief financial officer, Julian possessed the executive authority to manage all our vendor relationships. On a dismal, rainy Tuesday morning, he systematically logged into our procurement portal and deliberately canceled our exclusive purchasing agreements with the 3 primary suppliers of our patented biofiltration soil and our specialized smart glass structures. He intentionally breached the binding contracts, paying massive penalty fees using company funds, effectively severing our entire supply chain. According to the strict municipal bidding laws, any proposal lacking guaranteed material providers would be immediately disqualified by the City Council on technical grounds. When I received the automated cancellation alerts on my terminal, my heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I had to perform the greatest, most convincing act of my entire life. I violently shoved my chair back, letting it crash against the wall. I burst out of my office, forcing my breathing to become shallow and rapid. I made my face go pale, hyperventilating until real tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I found Julian casually pouring a cup of coffee in the executive break room. I lunged forward and grabbed his arm, letting my voice crack with genuine-sounding hysteria. "Julian, the suppliers just pulled out," I sobbed, my hands trembling as I clutched his tailored sleeve. "The logistics contracts are entirely voided. We have absolutely no building material secured. The City Council will throw out our bid by tomorrow morning. Everything we built is completely ruined." He immediately pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me tightly. By burying his face in my hair, he managed to mask his victorious, cruel smirk. "Quiet now, sweetheart. It will be all right," he whispered, playing the role of the comforting, protective savior flawlessly. "I will call the vendors right now. I will try to fix this mess. You are exhausted. Just go home and rest your mind." I nodded weakly against his shoulder, playing the broken, defeated woman perfectly. His guard dropped entirely. He truly believed he had finally severed my last remaining lifeline. He had absolutely no idea I had been anticipating this exact sabotage for several weeks. The moment I walked out of the corporate lobby, my tears dried instantly. My posture straightened. I drove straight to Marcus at the law firm. Using the limitless financial power of my $35 million trust fund, I had already established a highly classified shadow logistics network. Through an anonymous subsidiary corporation, I purchased a massive independent supply chain offering the exact same ecological materials. I paid the new vendors in full, using untraceable cash. I did not route a single digital document through the compromised servers of Etheria Greenscapes. Instead, accompanied by Marcus, I walked directly into the heavily guarded Municipal Archives building. I personally handed the physically sealed supplemental supply addendum directly to the head of the City Council Procurement Committee. My bid was not dead. It was legally bulletproof, fortified by millions of dollars, and completely invisible to my husband. Meanwhile, the psychological pressure on Julian was reaching a terrifying boiling point. The shadowy asset management firm that had purchased his $15 million gambling debt, which was secretly controlled entirely by me, began turning the screws. I instructed Silas to deploy psychological warfare. Silas dispatched a team of imposing, sharply dressed operatives to casually follow Julian everywhere he went. They sat in dark, unmarked vehicles outside his favorite upscale coffee shop. They stood across the street from our office building, smoking silently and watching him. They never spoke a word to him. They never physically touched him. But the implied threat of violent retribution was terrifyingly clear. Julian was suffocating under the immense paranoia. He desperately needed that 30% cut from Elena to save his own life. But Julian forgot that there is absolutely no honor among thieves. Elena was a ruthless corporate predator in her own right. She watched Julian rapidly unraveling from a distance. She noticed the menacing men quietly trailing him across the city. She quickly calculated the risks and realized that Julian was no longer a valuable corporate asset. He was a massive, dangerous liability who could drag her down with him. Why should she split the massive profits of a multi-million-dollar city contract with a desperate, marked man when she already possessed the stolen master blueprints? On Friday evening, Julian tried to call her private phone to finalize their offshore extraction plan. The call went straight to a disconnected tone. He tried calling her private office line. He was permanently blocked. He sent dozens of frantic, heavily encrypted messages across multiple platforms. Every single one of them bounced back undelivered. Elena had taken my architectural masterpieces, submitted them entirely under her own corporate banner, and completely erased Julian from the equation. She had ghosted him, leaving him entirely alone to face the wrath of the underworld. The realization of Elena's betrayal broke Julian's mind. He was completely out of options. He was cornered by phantom gangsters, utterly bankrupt, and violently stripped of his golden parachute. Pure animalistic panic took over his sophisticated facade. It was past midnight when he frantically returned to the dark, empty headquarters of Etheria Greenscapes. I was already there, waiting silently in the pitch-black corridor of the executive wing. I watched from the shadows as he stumbled into my private office. His breathing was ragged, loud, and wet. He was sweating profusely, his expensive designer suit wrinkled and stained with nervous perspiration. He immediately threw himself at the heavy steel wall safe hidden behind a massive landscape painting. He desperately needed to steal the emergency physical cash reserves to flee the country. He punched in his 6-digit passcode with trembling fingers. A harsh red light flashed on the digital display. Access denied. He slammed his fist against the metal keypad and typed it again, faster, significantly more aggressively. The red light flashed again. Access denied. "No, no, no," he muttered frantically, his voice vibrating with absolute terror. He completely lost his mind. He started tearing the pristine office apart. He hurled heavy crystal paperweights against the walls, shattering them into pieces. He swept hundreds of folders off the mahogany desk, ripping heavy filing drawers completely out of their metal tracks. He was desperately hunting for anything of value, resembling a feral animal trapped inside a rapidly sinking cage. I stepped out from the shadows. My sharp heels clicked loudly against the polished hardwood floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent, destroyed room. Julian froze instantly. He whirled around, his eyes wide with utter shock and primal fear. I leaned gracefully against the doorframe. The pale moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows caught the cold, calm smile resting on my face. In my right hand, I held up a small, sleek silver hard drive. "Are you looking for this, darling husband?" I asked gently. His bloodshot eyes locked onto the metallic device. He knew exactly what it was. It was the master drive. It contained every forged signature, every illegal offshore wire transfer, every deleted email to Elena, and the complete, undeniable audit trail of his $15 million embezzlement scheme. "How?" he choked out. His throat was incredibly tight, and his entire body began trembling violently as the monumental realization finally crashed down upon him. He was never the mastermind architect of my destruction. He was simply a blind rat, running endlessly through a maze I had built just for him. The morning sun reflected harshly off the limestone columns of Austin City Hall. The grand municipal auditorium was packed to absolute capacity with the city's most powerful real estate moguls, aggressive media reporters, and top-tier urban developers. The air buzzed with the low hum of anticipation. Sitting dead center in the front row was Elena. She wore a pristine, tailored white designer suit, her legs elegantly crossed, her lips curled into a confident, victorious smile. She was completely ready to accept her crown. Near the back of the auditorium, the heavy oak doors creaked open just enough for Julian to slip inside. He looked utterly destroyed. The dark circles under his eyes were bruised and purple. His breathing was shallow. He hovered in the shadows near the exit, his hand gripping the inside pocket of his jacket, clinging to a printed copy of their illicit agreement. He still harbored a desperate, pathetic hope that he could corner Elena after the ceremony and blackmail her into handing over his 30% cut. At exactly 10 o'clock, the head of the Municipal Planning Committee stepped up to the podium. A hush fell over the massive room. Flashbulbs popped. "Ladies and gentlemen," the commissioner began, his voice booming through the sound system. "After a rigorous evaluation of all submitted proposals for the Green Lung Initiative, the City Council has reached a unanimous decision. The contract will not be awarded to the frontrunner we initially expected. In fact, that specific firm has been officially and permanently disqualified from this bidding process due to newly uncovered, indisputable evidence of intellectual property theft." A collective gasp ripped through the audience. "The exclusive contract for the Green Lung Project," the commissioner continued, raising his voice over the rising murmurs, "is proudly awarded to the rightful creator of the design, Aurora Brooks and Etheria Greenscapes." Elena leaped to her feet, her chair scraping violently against the polished floor. Her victorious smile vanished, replaced by an ugly mask of pure rage. "This is a complete outrage," she shrieked, pointing fiercely at the podium. "This is a rigged decision. My firm submitted those blueprints flawlessly. I demand an immediate legal review." "That will not be necessary, Elena," I said. My voice rang out clearly across the auditorium. I stepped out from the side wings and walked directly to the center of the stage. I wore a sharp pitch-black suit. I did not look at the commissioner. I looked straight down at Elena. I raised my hand and signaled the audiovisual technician in the sound booth. The massive digital projection screen behind the podium flickered to life. The entire auditorium gasped again. Displayed in high definition, 20 feet tall, was the complete, undeniable autopsy of their betrayal. On the left side of the screen were the heavily encrypted emails between Elena and Julian, detailing the exact transfer of my proprietary files. On the right side was the crystal-clear surveillance photograph Silas had taken, showing the two of them celebrating at the French restaurant. And then, I played the audio. Julian's arrogant, mocking voice echoed through the municipal hall, boasting about stealing my life's work and laughing about the 30% profit split. But the final blow was the document projected right in the center. It was a federal copyright registration certificate for the exact architectural blueprints of the Green Lung Project. The official seal was clearly visible, and the date stamped at the bottom was exactly 6 months ago. I had legally protected my work long before Julian ever learned the passcode to my server. The reporters in the room went absolutely wild, their cameras flashing like a strobe light. Elena was shaking uncontrollably, her face entirely drained of blood. She desperately tried to salvage her reputation in front of the press. "This is a domestic dispute," she yelled, her voice pitching into a frantic screech. "This is a bitter wife attacking her husband. Any transfer of files was an internal company matter. He is a corporate officer." I leaned into the microphone. "That is where you are completely wrong, Elena. Julian is not my husband." The entire room went dead silent. I looked directly at the back of the auditorium, locking eyes with the pathetic, shivering man standing in the shadows. "I am announcing this publicly to the press and the municipal authorities right now. Julian and I have been legally and officially divorced for exactly 90 days. Therefore, Julian had absolutely no marital protections or internal shareholder rights when he hacked into my server. Every single file he transferred, and every single dollar he embezzled, constitutes an independent, premeditated act of severe corporate espionage and federal wire fraud." Julian snapped. The final thread of his sanity broke. He charged down the center aisle of the auditorium, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of fury. "You orchestrated all of this," Julian roared, his voice cracking wildly as he pointed a trembling finger at me. "You entirely framed me to steal the whole company for yourself. But you cannot escape the math, Aurora. You think you are so smart, but those $15 million in gambling debts and leveraged loans were created while we were legally married. Texas law is absolutely clear. You are still legally responsible for carrying exactly half of that debt. You owe $7.5 million, and I will make sure the creditors destroy you right alongside me." I did not flinch. I let his desperate screams wash over me, savoring the absolute irony of his final, pathetic weapon. I offered him a slow, terrifyingly cold smile. I raised my hand again, gesturing to the front row. Marcus, my attorney, stood up calmly. He straightened his tie, unclasped his leather briefcase, and pulled out a pristine, beautifully preserved legal document. He held it up for the entire room and the cameras to see. "Julian," I said, my voice dropping to a smooth, chilling register, "do you recognize this paper? It is the exact divorce decree you shoved into a pile of banking contracts and tricked me into signing 3 months ago. You were so utterly desperate to insulate yourself from the financial fallout of your own crimes, so eager to push my company off a cliff, that you had your lawyers draft a very specific ironclad waiver." Marcus approached the microphone and read the highlighted text loud and clear. "The filing party, Julian, voluntarily and permanently waives any and all rights, interests, and legal claims to the shared corporate assets, revenues, and subsequent liabilities of Etheria Greenscapes, effective immediately upon the date of this filing." I looked down at Julian, watching his eyes widen in pure, unadulterated horror. "The very divorce paper you used to stab me in the back just slit your own throat," I said softly, making sure every word echoed in the quiet hall. "You signed away your marital protection. You gave me total, unburdened ownership of the company, and by doing so, you legally accepted sole responsibility for your hidden financial disasters. You do not get to share the burden, Julian. You own the entire $15 million debt. Every single penny of it belongs to you alone." The heavy oak doors of the auditorium burst open again, but this time it was not a defeated man trying to slip in unnoticed. It was a coordinated tactical unit of the Austin Financial Crimes Division. The police officers moved with swift, uncompromising authority. Flashbulbs erupted in a blinding frenzy as officers slammed Julian against the nearest mahogany table, forcefully pulling his arms behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs echoed over the chaotic shouts of the reporters. They read him his rights, citing multiple federal charges of wire fraud, grand embezzlement, and the theft of corporate trade secrets. Across the room, Elena tried to slip out through a side exit, but two detectives intercepted her. They cuffed her right there in her pristine white designer suit, arresting her for corporate complicity, intellectual property theft, and municipal bribery. Her mask of superiority completely shattered, replaced by pale, trembling terror. As the officers dragged Julian down the center aisle, they passed right by where I stood. He dug his heels into the carpet, forcing the procession to halt for just a second. He was completely broken. His arrogant posture had collapsed into the pathetic stance of a cornered animal. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, completely abandoning whatever pride he had left. "Aurora, please," he begged, his voice cracking pitifully. "Use the company accounts to post my bail. Please do not let them lock me away. We shared 5 beautiful years together. We were happy. Please, remember our 5 years." I stepped closer to him. The police officers gave me a few inches of space. I leaned in, bringing my lips right next to his ear so that the ravenous reporters could not hear the final nail being driven into his coffin. "The very morning you manipulated me into signing those divorce papers, my late uncle left me an inheritance," I whispered, keeping my tone perfectly measured and terrifyingly calm. $35 million in liquid assets and prime real estate. If you had just been a decent husband for one more day, Julian, you would have legally been entitled to exactly half of it. But the public registry system said you were divorced. Goodbye, Julian. I pulled back and watched the exact moment his soul left his body. His eyes widened to an unnatural size. The sheer crushing weight of what his greed had cost him, $17.5 million slipping through his fingers purely because of his own treacherous impatience, hit him with the force of a freight train. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Just a raw, agonizing, suffocating gasp. The officers yanked him forward. His desperate, guttural screams echoed down the marble hallway, eventually swallowed entirely by the heavy slam of the police cruiser doors outside. 1 month later, the first shovels hit the dirt for the Green Lung Initiative. The underground syndicates, operating through the debt management firm I secretly controlled, entirely liquidated what little personal assets Julian had left. He was left rotting in a federal holding cell, currently facing a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years. Elena had her architectural license permanently revoked by the state board, and her firm filed for total bankruptcy within 3 weeks. I stood on the rooftop terrace of the 40th floor of my new corporate headquarters. The brisk morning wind whipped around me as I took a slow sip of black coffee. I looked out over the sprawling, vibrant skyline of Austin, a city preparing to breathe through the very lungs I had designed. My personal trust held $35 million. My company was steering a $100 million municipal project. But most importantly, I possessed an absolute, untouchable freedom that no one would ever take from me again. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the Texas sun on my face. I pulled the old, meaningless gold wedding band from my pocket and casually dropped it into a nearby metal trash bin. The game was over for them, but for me, everything was just beginning. Thank you so sincerely to all of our amazing listeners for tuning in to today's story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and felt the satisfaction of justice being served, please consider supporting our channel with just a $1 donation. You can scan the PayPal QR code on your screen or use the PayPal link provided in the description or the pinned comment. Your incredible generosity helps us pay our hardworking staff so they can support their families and continue bringing you more thrilling stories. Thank you again, and stay strong.